Well, I'm super excited today to be joined by Tiffany Herrell on an episode that we really have been wanting to have, where we're really going to talk about a concept and just an element that is necessary in every area of life, let's say, on every area of whatever activity that we undertake. So that's pretty much leadership. That's what we're going to talk about today in a modern world, in the corporate world as well, and then just how it has an effect on everything else we do. So, like I said, I'm joined today by Tiffany Herrell. How you doing? Let me just um, hear it from
I'm
you.
doing
How you
really
doing?
good. Yeah, I'm doing really good. I'm excited to be here and excited to share my perspective from my experience on leadership and some of the challenges you may face if you're in positions similar to myself.
That's pretty awesome. Tiffany is actually a very young gal, very hardworking, very professional, and well, she works for ATB in Alberta, obviously. And well, she has some really cool stuff to share. So, can you introduce yourself maybe a little bit more, Tiffany?
So I originally started out in the healthcare sector. One thing I knew from early on is I like to help people, and so naturally, being a young woman in southern Alberta, I thought the route I was going to go was going to be nursing or some sort of route such as that where I could really help people. So I did that for about 3 years. I supported individuals who were older, and then I also switched into moving to supporting individuals with disabilities. And it was a very interesting time, and that's where I started my career. Then I had gotten into volunteering in my community, and that was really what propelled me into the business type of space. So I worked for a local not for profit on a partnership program. And that was another way for me to truly help people, work with people. And then after spending 2 years doing that, I realized there's lots of different ways that you could help people while progressing your career. So I ended up moving into the world of banking, which I never thought I was going to be a banker, frankly. And ever since then, it's been about 4.5 years in banking, and specifically in commercial banking and that type of banking. And I've been very excited about the role that I could play in people's entrepreneurship journeys, but also in my team's journey of their personal development and some of the things we've been able to do together.
Awesome. Yeah, I know that that's one of the areas of interest where we kind of also got to know each other. I know you're a lot into entrepreneurship as well, and I mean you do have a passion for that and like to work and work with and help entrepreneurs. That's something very characteristic about you. And how come you decided to say go for that field, like start your career in the area where you started it?
Yeah, I think the, the reason why I was so interested in entrepreneurship, because if you want to know someone who has passion and drive, but also is willing to take on challenges, open your own business and it will stretch you in every way. And so that's mostly what drew me. I think that I have a passion for helping people and change, and I think there's a lot of opportunity in social enterprises, which are starting to become quite big,
Right.
and also in traditional business as well. And I mean, color me crazy, but I think that business is what drives forward our societies, and if we can drive forward social good through our businesses, we have lots of room to make an impact. So that's what drove me that way.
Agreed, 100%. That's pretty awesome. Thanks for sharing. And well, like I said before, we're really going to talk about leadership today. I think you have a lot to contribute on that area. And we I know some people who listen to us are very young and they may just Yeah, they may just be getting started in this leadership path or in the business world. So I think it will be a good idea to maybe hear what your definition of leadership is, even for some of the old folks as well. Like, I think it's a good thing to listen to different perspectives and fresh opinions, points of view and experience as well. So, what would you say about leadership?
I would say that I never thought I would be in leadership. I'm a bit of a control freak. So, leadership is a new adventure for me in the last couple of years, and it's been quite the adventure. For me, what drew me to leadership is the ability to help people make change. On the front line, when I was working directly with customers, I was the one doing it, but I was having great conversations with my peers. I had great ideas about how we might better do things. And so that's what propelled me into getting into leadership. One thing that I didn't know I would love as much as I do about leadership is this working with people to develop and achieve their own personal goals while achieving the corporate goals. I think that as a leader, you kind of walk two lines, is what is best for my employees and then also what is best for the company and meeting our goals at the end of the day. And balancing those two things is what I do on a daily basis. So that's what I would say about leadership. I thought when I got into leadership, one of my experiences, and I'll just bring this up front, is being a young, passionate individual and getting into a leadership role. I am oftentimes the youngest one in the room. And so one of the biggest things for me as a leader is feeling like I belong in that room, but knowing that if you have those two intentions of what's best for the company and your employees, that you belong in that room regardless of your age or whatever may be behind your name, your designation, your experience. And so that was also a big part of my leadership experience as well, is overcoming that imposter syndrome so that I could effectively achieve those two outcomes.
Right. And I think, I mean, of course, I think sometimes, a lot of the times when I think about this, I know I also tend to say to myself, okay, yeah, we're young and we're a lot of the times the youngest in the room, but that's not going to last forever, right? Like, of course, that's not going to be forever. And some even younger folks are taking the lead and then starting to do stuff. So, what would you say that window of opportunity is bringing to us now with, being the youngest in the room, but just for a while?
Ultimately, we have more time to achieve our goals. That's what I always tell myself is the benefit of being in the role sooner. I have more time to learn and make mistakes and really hone my craft. So you got into entrepreneurship very young, and so you have more time to hone those skills that make you a successful entrepreneur. And on my side, I got into leadership fairly young, and so I've had more time to hone my craft around leadership. So that's the biggest opportunity. I think on the flip side as well, being in this beginner's mindset or not having the years of that's how it's always been done allows me to
Yeah.
show a unique perspective on, for example, maybe there's better ways we can do things. I know I'm oftentimes the one that gets put on projects or brought in when it's technology related, which is very cool. So there's some very neat opportunities with being where we are right now, because we are living in that technology-driven society. And we grew up with technology and we're being able to implement it in the workforce in different ways than other people probably think about. So
Exactly. Yeah, that's one key factor that I always think about, and I think it's pretty fascinating, pretty awesome. And you know, where how would you say your education on leadership started?
well, my resume. It's fairly short, frankly. So when I was growing up, I grew up in a small town, and I think one of the best things that I ever had happen was that I grew up in a small town, and that allowed me a lot of opportunities that people didn't have. in bigger
Right.
areas. So there was roles that everybody had to play, and that's where I got my true first taste of leadership. Moving into high school and university, obviously, I was very involved in student clubs, student politics. I did a lot of public speaking early on in my life, which is something that I'm grateful for. I don't get
Right.
shy very often, so that helps. In university, I moved into a role that allowed me to explore programs and building professional relationships was quite unique in my role in the not-for-profit sector. And that really allowed me a platform to start to build these skills of how do you motivate people? How do you connect people? What does program and project planning and development look like? What's benchmarking? How do we put that into place? In that role, I had a outcome and was told to go do it. And here's some funding from the university and the local not-for-profits to achieve this goal. And that was where I truly got a taste of the potential in building those skills. After that, I
Right.
decided to move into a company that was also socially minded. And in the commercial lending and advice space is where I started. And then from there, I moved into leadership. So I've been in leadership for about a year and a half now in my current position. So that's my resume.
That's pretty awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think no, yeah, I think it starts for some people. It starts with like formal education, maybe, right? But I think at some point there is also the opportunity, like you just shared, the opportunity of taking on a leadership role, even without a lot of experience or even without certain education. And I think that's one of the best ways to learn as well, and just to have the opportunity to hone in your skills. Now, I know that you just mentioned something about imposter syndrome. Can you maybe tell us a little bit more about that?
For sure. When I first came to commercial banking as a whole, frankly, and
Okay.
my leadership role, I had a unique experience that maybe some people who move into these roles don't necessarily have. I'm not quite sure because I'm not them. But when I joined some of the teams that I joined, the average age was probably 20 years older than I was, mostly male dominated. And here I was coming out of university into a role, and I was told, okay, now you need to help people, give them advice, and then do the commercial lending side as well on the side. And I walked in on day one and I was like, well, I know I can work really hard, and you give me a challenge and I'll do it. But there were days when I was in that role that I thought, oh man, hopefully my boss didn't make a mistake here. There's learning journeys with any role, but especially in some of these bigger roles that I didn't work from the ground up in my current company.
Right.
I built networks. I had experience from other places, but not working from the ground up gave me this thought that maybe I wasn't as qualified as everybody else in the room, which ultimately was in my head and not what was being thought out there. And so, yeah, imposter syndrome was something I dealt with. I think it's also interesting. Recently, I read an article by the Harvard Business Review called Stop Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome. And so I've been thinking a lot about lately the imposter syndrome and the role of formal education and what should be on your resume. And that's how that influenced it. But also on the other side, the diversity and the lack of diversity in some of these rooms. So coming into that room where it was white men, the age 40 to 50, and I walk in and I'm in my high heels, um, there was a diversity aspect that wasn't there as well, and some bias on my part of like what it meant to be in those rooms and some of the systems as well. So yeah.
What were some of your first impressions when you entered these rooms?
Well, all I can tell you is that I when I first started, a lot of the conversations around sports and hockey, like that was the casual conversation. When you join a new team or you do something new, there's this need to feel involved and welcome and connecting. And when I walked into those rooms and people are talking about hockey or football and, sports, I'm not a sports person. I don't think I'll ever be a sports person. That's that gave me some anxiety. And there was a point there where it's like, well, should I learn about hockey so that I can join those conversations?
Right.
Because I remember sitting at like a Vietnamese restaurant with like 5 of my peers, and we were just sitting there and eating. And the whole time I feel like they talked about sports, and I was like, ooh, this is really good food. Like, So sometimes those situations, not related to your job, but to the people that you're with, can make you feel a little bit, yeah, like you're the odd one out there. So since then, have I learned about hockey? No, no. I don't think any amount of hockey talk could make me want to learn more about hockey. I'm the worst Canadian ever, but that was one of my first impressions. But on the flip side, I also have, I think there are people in our lives, in our professional careers, who teach us little nuggets of things. And on the flip side of that, I had this leader, and he went above and beyond to challenge me. And, even though I was young and even though I had less commercial banking experience than most of the people on the team, I still, he challenged me to add my value where I can add my value and not deliver or perform the same way everybody else does, but the way that I do it best. And that ultimately propelled me a bit farther than I think if I would have tried to be talking hockey over dinner. I think it's a much better way to go. So I'm grateful for the mentors and the champions in my life who have helped me overcome that imposter syndrome and lean into where I deliver value. So
That would be a great title for your book.
yeah,
Coffee over
yeah,
dinner.
yeah. That Vietnamese place, I tell you. So
Now,
yeah.
yeah, you also, I mean, you just talked about mentorship, right? What No, it's sometimes a topic that gets mentioned a lot, but I think it's a lot harder to practice. What would be what would be some of your initial thoughts on mentorship, having a mentor, becoming a mentor?
My are I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for people along the way and people to provide that
Mm-hmm.
guidance. My number one piece of advice to entrepreneurs is ask so many free questions to everybody you know in your life because people will help you out. The role of mentorship in my experience and my career has been quite interesting because I feel like mentors come from all over the place, but I do carry some long lasting mentor relationships from like previous jobs or previous bosses. So if you want a really easy way to find a mentor, make sure you work for a really great person, ask them questions and try to
Right.
pick their brain. I remember I had a boss named Diana, and she was the executive director at the not for profit I worked at. And to this day, I think we're like 8 years later, I still go to her and I still ask her questions. And then on the flip side, I can always trust that when I'm talking about something that she will spot things that I would never think of. And so having bosses who you build those relationships, that's a really easy way to find some mentorship. On the flip side as well, I know networking events kind of suck and they feel like it's hard, but one of my favorite things about networking events is meeting people who are doing great things in the community who you want to be like them or they have something you want to emulate and connecting with them and building mentors for specific reasons to ask them questions and develop in specific areas as well. So.
What is a mentor for you? Like in your own words, who is that? Who does that?
I would say that a mentor is someone who you can go to for honest feedback. Like there is a layer of trust with a mentor that they can
Mm-hmm.
provide you with honest feedback. But ultimately, what's important to me in a mentor is that it comes from a place of experience. So I look for mentors who are smarter, more successful than me. And so that's what a mentor is to me. Someone you can build relationships through, and they can give you honest feedback, and you can help each other develop and achieve your goals on both sides. Because I think making sure there's value on both sides of the table is something, as someone who wants to be mentored, we don't necessarily think about, but we should think about more, because people are more receptive if there's value on both sides.
Right.
So, yeah.
I've heard about this concept or this idea of looking for mentors who are maybe just one step ahead of the game you're playing rather than going for the top notch expert, because that's where you can learn more, like by going with somebody who is just one step ahead. What do you think about that? Does that make sense?
Honestly, I've never thought about that at all. I can see the pros to someone who's recently been in your space, who's closer to your area, who remembers that part of the journey a bit better. But I personally, do I think that you should limit yourself of who you want to connect with and who you want to build meaningful relationships with? I don't know if that's an approach that I would take, because I mean, I'm a driven girl, so I shoot my shot, and so far it's worked. So, building the relationships with people much higher up, I think those types of people think differently, or building different skill sets that maybe people closer to your level aren't, and so you would be missing out on a different perspective.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the point I was trying to make there. And now, would you say the role of a mentor then is to, I mean, because there are certain perspectives on that, right? And one of them is a mentor is not going to be, of course, is never going to be chasing you or trying to look you up to give you advice or anything like that. Rather, is somebody that you will seek out, right? And of course, that's a different role from what a coach would do, what a consultant would do, right? It's just a very different type of relationship, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that it in the coach and consultant role and transition into a mentor, I think that to get that mentorship level, there's definitely, you have to expend effort to change those relations from the coach or the consultant to that mentorship role, and I think it's work for sure.
I think it's a much more personal relationship when it comes to mentorship. You could ask, I mean, I think it also kind of starts in where there's probably mutual interest, like that mentor sees something in you and kind of has the interest of supporting you or seeing you grow, or maybe even working with you at some point. So that person could also, I mean, it would definitely also have an interest of helping you out that way. And of course, that's never related to money. Like, you don't pay somebody to be your mentor. You may treat them for dinner, of course, like get them a coffee, but that's very different.
It would be for mentorship. I'm not going to lie, because you can't pay for the type of value that you get from those types of relationships in your life. So, yeah. Yeah. What are your thoughts
How
on
many?
mentorship?
Well, definitely, I think that if you want to not only learn more about your field, but also be able to expand your network, right? Like have access to more people as well. I think having a mentor is an excellent way of doing that. And I think it's also a way for you to provide, like, be accommodating and provide value to your mentor in any way you can. At the same time, I do believe that it has to be a very specific profile for it to work, or you could have different mentors for different purposes. But in general, if we're talking about your career or your startup, I think it's very, very important for you to mentor carefully, like choose your mentors carefully and choose somebody who has certain skills, certain knowledge, certain experience and connections that will help you out because like you said before, people are willing to I mean, sometimes, most of the times people are willing to give you a hand. So when a problem arises or a challenge needs to be addressed, a lot of the times your mentor can be that source to connect you with someone else who will have an answer for you. And not only that, but also serve as a tool for inspiration when you need to get a little bit of that.
Yeah, no, I great, and I agree with this sentiment of targeting mentors because the reality is I don't think anybody's perfect. I'm definitely not perfect, so if there is a pill for that, let me know. But having targeted mentors for different areas because you're going to be in different situations and going to the same person for advice all the time. One, I think you're putting yourself in a little bit of a risky situation there because if you only seek out one place for advice or you only seek out one perspective, you may not be seeing the whole picture. You may be missing opportunities for further development. So having multiple
Yeah.
mentors for different areas or from different perspectives is always a great idea in my opinion.
What would be the first piece of advice you would give to someone looking for a mentor?
I would say that it starts with high quality networking. And when I was in university,
Mm.
we attended all these networking events, and they talked about mentorship and they talked about networking, and it just felt exhausting. Like it felt like shallow, surface level interactions. And I definitely wasn't doing it right. I wasn't getting value, and I don't think the people on the other end of those interactions were doing it right. So my first piece of advice is if you're going to an event and you see someone who you want to talk to, or you see someone who you're interested in being mentored by, to go talk to
Right.
them, but be genuinely interested in them. That is the number one place where I would start is don't lead with yourself in your sales pitch. Get to know the other person because people like to be heard, they like to be seen, and they're much more receptive to having the conversation on the other side if you do that well on the front end. So I don't know what the textbooks or the gurus would say, but I'd say my personal piece of advice is make sure you spend quality time with someone and make sure
Mm-hmm.
you don't lead with yourself, but you learn more about them, ask them about them, so that the relationship's not all one-sided.
Of course. And then there is also maybe an opportunity. You mentioned attending events. And there is always, of course, the general admission ticket, right? Like the $50 ticket, something like that. But then you also get the opportunity to upgrade or get a different type, let's say VIP access or whatever. I think that would be an investment worth doing, where if you have to pay a higher ticket to get access to um, a different profile of attendees and get the opportunity to network with them or even network with the speakers. I think that's also probably a good idea, right? And you get the opportunity to connect with them there. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say it would depend on your goals and outcomes, right? Because if you're a person who's a startup, a very wise person once told me you're going to succeed as an entrepreneur if you only spend about $1 a day. I think you told me that once upon a time about doing things cheap, doing things lean up front, being creative. I'm not
I did
someone
tell you
who,
that.
yeah, you did tell me that. Um, but I'm not someone who would invest that big money up front. So yes, for some people, But if your goal is to network and build your skills networking and finding a mentor, I think you can do that effectively in some events or dinners, etc., with the general ticket. But if there's admission to another room that you want to be in, yes, I feel that might be an investment. But I don't think that money and buying your way into any room is going to guarantee you
Of
results
course.
for sure. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And there are a lot of ways to kind of hack your way around that, or just get access to, especially nowadays with the internet and just many other resources. Really, there are plenty of ways you could do that. And now, I'm pretty sure with COVID, a lot of things have changed when it comes to leadership, and also a lot of the professional groups are now working from home. Meetings are virtual. So, what would you say has become the biggest challenge for leadership with this, impact due to COVID?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest challenge is managing mental health across a screen and
Hmm.
not necessarily managing it, but
Yeah.
identifying and empathizing because I think COVID has been an adventure for all of us. Like, we are all in the same storm. I saw a picture the other day. We may be on different boats, but we are in the same storm. So making sure that the team that you're leading, how are you motivating them differently across the screen? Are you able to pick up on their cues? Can you see if there's been a change in behavior? Are they doing okay? That's been the most difficult part, in my opinion, is managing and understanding how they're doing on the other side. That's been the biggest change, in my opinion. Has there been other changes? Yes. Is it harder to kind of workshop ideas and spend a day together to just knock some work out? Yes, that's much harder. Zoom fatigue is a thing, but for me, my biggest concern is always my team and making sure that they're okay on the other side, and there's less indicators for me as their leader to see that. So,
Exactly. To me, leadership is also a lot about becoming a facilitator, an enabler, let's say, of the right environment, the tools that are needed to perform the job, just a bunch of things there. And yeah, like you said, COVID did bring a lot of changes to that. What are your thoughts on digital tools? Even like sometimes I've seen um, activities, video games, uh, kind of software that people can use, companies can use to kind of boost teams morale. Do you currently implement any of that stuff? Do you think it's a good idea, or what are your techniques to keep your team together?
yeah, for me, the the games and that type of virtual connection, I wouldn't say that I've invested too much time there. Where I truly invest my time is facilitating connection, making sure that there's strong connections between my team members and myself. So whether that be a weekly coffee chat that is in the calendar that anybody who wants to go to can go to, whether that be team meetings where we focus on getting to know each other as a team. And my team probably hates it, but I think it helps that team building, the icebreakers, because in this role, in this environment, it's important more now than ever that we share a little bit of ourselves with our colleagues so that we feel as connected as we can professionally. So making sure that they know each other. For example, does Cindy has a birthday party coming up and she can talk about that big stuff in our team chat. Um, Someone's doing a pumpkin carving competition, so they want votes. So creating an environment where they can post in that team chat so that we can connect outside of the work and build those relationships, because COVID, in my opinion, COVID's really hampered our connection to other people in our neighborhoods, our communities, at our gyms, whatever it may be, our friends. And so how do we build and strengthen the connections at work over the digital platforms? It's been an adventure, so.
Quite an adventure. How long do, how long do, yeah, so like you talked about these meetings that you have with your team, or like the chats. How long does this take, like one of these chats?
Yeah. So the way that I approach it, and I am no expert here, but it seemed to work. It could be the people in the team, it could be how I set it up, it could be the environment. But what I've done
Could be
is
the free cookies.
it could be lightning struck somewhere. It's fine. Um, but I focused on having a time where my team members felt like they were supported by me to disconnect from their work and come into this hour-long coffee a week. They didn't have to, but if they wanted to, come in for this hour. And at the beginning, I was very strict about when they started to get into work conversation, that I would cut that right off. And that really seemed to work. We learned a lot of interesting stuff. I have a very diverse team, and so we learned a lot about cricket. We learned a lot about, I had an Australian team member, so we played like some trivia about Australia. Team members were celebrating Diwali, so we learned about and talked about what does those celebrations look like. Team members are running, we talked about workout regimes and race running, but really protecting that space to connect on different items that we were interested outside of work. And so I also, in our team meeting before, like when we had a new person join the team, everybody went around and introduced themselves, and it was a priority of mine to have my team members connect one-on-one with that new team member as well, part of their learning and onboarding, but also so they felt a part of the team. And so those are different ways that I had facilitated that. So the coffee chats aren't as busy anymore because people are fairly connected and they feel comfortable with each other, but every once in a while there is one where everybody will pop into and
Nice.
learn about
Nice.
Eid or whatever it may be. So yeah.
That's pretty cool. Does this happen once a week?
Yeah, I
Once
have
a
it
month?
scheduled once a week, but yeah, it's hit or miss, right? They have jobs to do.
Right.
I don't manage the coffee chat anymore, and so sometimes a lot of people are there, sometimes it's two people, just depends on how they're doing. If they need a break, to step away and do something else for the time, and yeah.
Right. Well, awesome. Thank you for sharing all of this. I believe that we would need a lot more time to talk about all of this, but this has been definitely super, super good. Now, as we just end, as we just approach the end of today's episode, is there anything you would like to share as a final thought? Maybe something that you would have loved me to ask you, but I didn't, or any secret sauce that you would like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I think that this was great, and I love to chat about it. One thing that I love to do is talk, and so maybe that's why they put me into leadership, because I'll talk through every meeting. It's fine, I'll present on anything. One thing I would say, my biggest learning as a leader and my biggest learning in building relationships, partnerships with customers, clients, partners, whoever it is if you want to be successful and you feel like you are having challenges, it's a good idea to look at how you are communicating with your team members. Are you communicating clearly? Are you setting clear expectations? Are you letting them know where the bounds are? With customers, do you have a clear vision? Are you communicating that clearly? In partners, are you setting expectations? And so my one piece of advice to anybody in any role ever is if you want to go farther, look at how you're communicating and feedback from others how you're communicating. Brene Brown talks about in her book Dare to Lead, clear is kind. And I have it, you can't see it, it's posted behind my screen, but clear is kind in any interaction that you do. That's one of my areas where I feel like I added value is because I show up, I'm clear with how I communicate, expectations are clear. And from there, you can just have very robust conversations and make progress. So,
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Whenever you start a new relationship with a client, with a supplier, with a teammate, just sharing, I mean, just telling them exactly what you can deliver and what you can commit. I think it's great because it also removes any expectations, right, that they may have created themselves that may lead to disappointment at some point, and that's just not good.
professional and personal. Not working, look at your communication. That's all I got to say.
Awesome. Mic drop. Thank you. Well, for those who are interested in maybe learning more about you, about maybe about your company or your company culture, or may even want to connect with you, do you have any advice on how they could connect with you, how they could reach you?
Yeah, me, I'd say the easiest way to reach out to me is likely through LinkedIn. Send me a
Okay.
message. I'm usually quite active on LinkedIn. Let me know what you're looking for, what you want to connect about, and I can definitely either schedule a coffee or send you in the right direction, whatever that looks like at that time.
Wonderful. Well, I certainly appreciate your time very much, and I do look forward to this episode, maybe in 5, 10 years from now, to hear a lot more about your career and how it has evolved. And yeah, your time. We'll be in touch. Take
Sergio.
care. Bye.